Welcome back, everyone. The passion of sports, the competitive nature. You play to win the game. An NFL football coach is famous for that saying. But in this case, perhaps a tie was a good thing. Co-champions of the state of Ohio when it comes to Division I hockey, and Chris Irwin, the athletic director from Northview High School, here to talk about what was an amazing weekend, last weekend down in Columbus. Chris, thanks for coming in the head coach's stead. We do appreciate it. Take us back to this incredible game with St. Ignatius, two powerhouses. Northview, who's been to Columbus so many times in 3 years in a row, and St. Ignatius, a powerhouse as well. You're familiar foes, and you go toe-to-toe for a long time at Nationwide Arena. Tell us about that.
Boy, it seems like it's 2 weeks ago now, a long time ago. The game just progressed. It was interesting. I came down at the end of the third period thinking we always do this awards presentation afterwards, and I go down the tunnel, and 7 overtimes later, I'm still standing in the tunnel, and these kids are still working their tails off trying to score a goal and prevent goals. Obviously, we stopped a lot of goals that day.
And here's one goal. You just saw the Wildcats. Well, it's Wildcats versus Wildcats, right? And here comes Ignatius, and I think do they knot it up here?
Not that one, no.
That's one of the 77 saves.
This is where they knotted up right here.
Okay. And at that point, when did they score?
That was about 7 minutes to go in the third period. So time was getting near the end, and they ended up tying it up. We scored halfway through the first period, I believe. So it was. So you're
thinking at 7 minutes to go, okay, we got a shot here. We can just hang on. But this is when your goalie, at 7 minutes, when they tie it up, he begins to stand on his head. Or maybe he stood on his head the whole game, right? David Marsh? David Marsh
made quite a few saves the entire game. A lot of those in the overtime period for sure.
Okay, and this is when you come back. So a lot of time has elapsed when you come back and you take the team picture as state co-champions. But 7 overtimes. So you play 1 overtime, 2 overtimes, 3 overtimes. At what point, Chris, did conversations begin going to the point where it said, okay, maybe we need to call this a day?
Actually, it happened after the 7th overtime period.
Okay, so 4 and 5, you're playing on.
You know, it's in the back of our minds at some point, how much longer will this go on if nobody can score a goal? I know Mike Jones and I talked after the 7th overtime period. He was joking, our head coach. He was joking, I'm not sure what else I have to say to the guys in the locker room to keep them motivated. And he, you know, we start questioning the fact, you know, does the OHSA have a halt point, or if we go 2, 3, 4, 5 more overtimes, this can't continue if nobody scores. And at that point, I talked to one of the Columbus Blue Jackets, Mason, and said, Dan Ross, any of the members of the OHSA concerned with player safety with regard to fatigue? And he said, actually they are. And about 5 minutes later, Dr. Ross came down and started that conversation with myself and Coach Jones, and then we moved all over to Ignatius's locker room and started that conversation with about 3 minutes to go before the 8th overtime was supposed to start. So the timing wasn't necessarily great, but that's when the conversation started, is what our alternatives are.
Initially, there was some backlash. Like, what do you mean you're settling for a tie?
Sure.
It's a state championship game. You play to win the game. That appears to have abated as time has gone on now. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think initially our kids had struggled coming back onto the ice when we told them we were no longer going to continue to play for their safety. They weren't happy about it. I understand, as a former athlete, I would have wanted to continue to play. I think as the week has gone along, though, and just reflecting back on that game and really the strain it put on our players, the fatigue, the cramping going on.
That's what I was going to ask you. What about cramping in the 4th overtime in the locker room?
Sure. You know, so you play 2 overtime periods and they cut the ice. So you come back in the locker room for 15 minutes, stretching, massaging muscles, making sure they're hydrated. You know, bananas, oranges, things like that. Throwing granola bars, things like that at them to keep the energy levels up. But at some point, they're 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, and we did not want to leave that. We want to make sure that every kid left that ice on their own 2 feet, that they skated off. And you know, our conversation would be very different today if we went on 2, 3, 4 more overtimes and the kid was paralyzed or there was an injury, for sure. So I think as the kids realize it, as we move along through the week, there's been a lot of good hype going now. I know through social media early in the week, You know, why they should have played. There has to be one winner. You know, we always witness these games, you know, one for the ages. It's an instant classic where at the end of the game, no one deserved to lose that game. I think in this case, neither team deserved to lose the game. And I think we had it right.
Yeah.
No team lost the game. And I think Coach Hamps really defines what that game was about. So, an interesting stat, and David Marsh has been great with media. He's had a lot of requests this week. He's stopping 77 shots. There were 78 shots thrown at him. But in addition to those shots, there were 54 blocks by other members of Northview's team, whether it was
saving the day
defense.
too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
was there more flack, Chris, coming from Cleveland because they said, well, you know, our guys dominated the play. Of course, you wanted it to be over. So you heard some of that, right?
Absolutely. And I think, again, when people can step back and understand that we made this decision for what was best for kids, they're high school athletes. It's not the NHL. Right. You know, regardless if they had 78 shots or we had 78 shots, that wouldn't have changed our decision as we were talking through what the plan was moving forward. At the end, if we could have come on after the 6th overtime period and said, hey, after this next overtime period, if nobody scores, we're going to have Coach Hamps, I think that would have been a little easier for the crowd. In addition to recognizing the kids after the game, which we didn't have a chance to because obviously the fans that were there were quite a few boos going out, and Dr. Russ had a hard time speaking. Those were two things, you know, looking back, hindsight, I wish could have been different. But again, as we've moved through the week, this has been a pretty cool thing for the kids.
By and large, very, very positive. And the stories those kids will have to tell, you know, the grandkids,
sure,
their own kids. I mean, and it's really going to be hard for them to embellish what happened because just the real story is incredible enough.
Well, I talked with ESPN. I was on SportsCenter on Sunday and just made the comment, you know, in 25 years, this could be a great 30 for 30 show.
Sure.
Where these two teams come back together and talk about this game, and who knows, maybe they find a pond and they try to figure out who can score the last goal.
What if you played seven overtimes and nobody won? right? I can see the announcer right now. You talked about the players and the media attention, and you were on SportsCenter. What actually you've now arrived, if you're on Conklin and Company, this is when you've really made it. Chris Irwin.
Thanks, appreciate it.
But when we come over there, we do the 13 ABC All-Stars, and we'll be over there again this year. You know, we'll give a salute to those hockey players who you know, gave of themselves for so much in a team that really did not have a dominant regular season, right? That it all came together when the playoffs started.
We every year you graduate 8, 10, 11 seniors. Coach Jones does a great job getting these kids to buy into what his program is about. You have injuries, had an illness that someone was out for a period of time, and you know Coach Jones has these kids at the end of the season just hitting all cylinders. And yeah, I think the Blaze article was great. The Thursday before it said unranked, unfazed. I don't think anyone in that locker room, our coaching staff and our players, felt that we were the underdog in any of that. You know, yeah, we beat the number 2 team in St. John's the weekend before, then we knocked off St. Charles, who was number 5, and then Ignatius was number 1. So I don't think that fazed our kids. I think they feel this is the 3rd year in a row. That's what they compete for every year, and they're going out there and they're laying it all on the line, and they play. They're emotional. They got that grit. They're sacrificing their body parts.
There's a standard of the Northview hockey program that players want to live up to. You did this year, state co-champions. Chris Irwin, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Incredible ride
Appreciate it.
this week, and will be for years to come. Make it a great Sunday, everybody. We'll see you next week on Conklin & Company.